If you are a Formula One fan, there is a very good chance that GT3 racing has always existed somewhere in the background of your motorsport awareness. You have seen the cars before, you have heard the term mentioned during race weekends or in passing conversations, but you have probably never felt the need to fully understand what GT3 actually is. That reaction makes sense because Formula One has always positioned itself as the absolute peak of motorsport, with the fastest cars, the most advanced technology, and the best drivers in the world. When that is the standard, anything slower can easily be dismissed as secondary or less important. However, GT3 racing exists for a very different reason, and once you understand that reason, it becomes clear why this category has quietly become one of the most important pillars of modern motorsport. GT3 is not trying to compete with Formula One, and it is not trying to replace it. Instead, it exists to solve many of the problems that modern motorsport has created for itself over time, particularly in terms of cost, accessibility, and sustainability. GT3 is a global racing category regulated under FIA guidelines and built around production-based Grand Touring cars. That means that every GT3 car you see on track starts life as a real road car rather than a clean-sheet prototype. Cars like Ferraris, Mercedes-AMGs, Porsches, Lamborghinis, Aston Martins and BMWs are all adapted into GT3 specification, but they retain the visual identity and DNA of the road cars they are based on. This immediately makes GT3 more relatable because fans are not watching abstract machines, but rather racing versions of cars they recognize. Despite being production-based, GT3 cars are still extremely serious race machines. They feature stripped interiors, full roll cages, advanced suspension systems, aerodynamic packages designed for downforce and stability, racing slick tires, and sophisticated electronic systems. These are not compromised cars, but the philosophy behind their design is fundamentally different from Formula One. GT3 cars are not built to push technological boundaries at any cost. They are built to race each other closely, consistently, and across many different championships around the world. One of the most defining elements of GT3 racing, and one of the most misunderstood by Formula One fans, is the concept of balance of performance. Balance of performance, often referred to as BOP, is a regulatory system that adjusts various aspects of each car to ensure that no single manufacturer has a dominant performance advantage. This can involve changes to engine output, vehicle weight, aerodynamics, fuel capacity, or ride height, depending on the situation. The goal is not to make every car identical, but to ensure that different cars can compete fairly on the same grid. From a Formula One perspective, this concept can initially feel artificial or even unfair. In Formula One, the fastest team wins because they designed and developed the best car. In GT3, outright speed is intentionally controlled so that competition is not decided purely by budget or engineering resources. Instead, balance of performance shifts the emphasis toward execution. Races are won through consistency, intelligent strategy, tyre management, and driver skill rather than through spending the most money or exploiting regulatory loopholes. GT3 exists largely because motorsport needed a category that manufacturers could realistically commit to over the long term. Formula One is incredibly expensive, extremely complex, and constantly evolving. The barrier to entry is so high that only a handful of manufacturers and teams can realistically participate at the top level. GT3, by contrast, offers cost-controlled development, long homologation cycles, and global relevance. A single GT3 car can be sold to customer teams and raced in multiple championships across different continents with minimal modification. This customer-focused model is one of GT3's greatest strengths. Manufacturers do not build GT3 cars solely for factory teams. They build them to be sold, raced, and supported by private teams and drivers. This creates large, diverse grids filled with a mix of professional drivers, endurance specialists, and so-called gentleman drivers, all competing under the same regulations. The result is a racing environment that is healthy, sustainable, and remarkably resilient compared to many other categories. From a driving perspective, GT3 racing demands a very different skill set than Formula One. While GT3 cars are slower on paper, they are often more physically demanding to drive. They are heavier, they rely less on aerodynamic grip, and they move around significantly more on corner entry and exit. Drivers must manage traction control systems, anti-lock braking systems, tyre degradation, and fuel consumption over long stints. Precision is still crucial, but adaptability becomes just as important. Unlike Formula One, where drivers are often chasing absolute perfection over a single qualifying lap, GT3 drivers are constantly adjusting to changing conditions. Track temperatures fluctuate, tyres wear over time, fuel loads change the balance of the car, and traffic becomes a constant challenge. In endurance racing, drivers must share the car with teammates, each of whom may have a different driving style and pace. This adds another layer of complexity because success depends not just on individual performance but on collective execution. Endurance racing is where GT3 truly distinguishes itself. Races lasting 12 or 24 hours introduce variables that simply do not exist in Formula One. Drivers must race through the night, deal with changing weather conditions, manage fatigue, and maintain concentration over extended periods. Mistakes are costly, not just for the individual driver, but for the entire team. This environment rewards discipline, patience, and mechanical sympathy as much as raw speed. This is one of the reasons why GT3 racing is so highly respected among drivers, including those from Formula One. Drivers like Max Verstappen have openly expressed their appreciation for GT racing because it emphasizes fundamental driving skills. GT3 racing exposes weaknesses quickly. You cannot rely on overwhelming downforce, perfect track conditions, or short race distances. You have to manage the car as it evolves throughout a race and adapt to whatever the situation demands. Comparing GT3 directly to Formula One often misses the point. These categories are not competitors, and they are not trying to achieve the same goals. Formula One exists to push the limits of technology and performance, showcasing what is possible when engineering and innovation are prioritized above all else. GT3 exists to provide competitive, sustainable, and globally accessible racing that manufacturers, teams, drivers, and fans can engage with over the long term. Formula One is aspirational, representing the pinnacle of what motorsport can be. GT3 is relatable, representing what motorsport can realistically sustain. Both are essential and both serve different roles within the wider ecosystem of racing. The growth of GT3 is not a sign that Formula One is failing, but rather that motorsport benefits from having multiple strong categories with different philosophies. The reason GT3 is now everywhere is simple. It works. It works for manufacturers by offering global exposure without unsustainable costs. It works for teams by providing stable regulations and competitive grids. It works for drivers by rewarding complete skill sets rather than specialization. And it works for fans by delivering close racing, recognizable cars, and genuine unpredictability. GT3 does not rely on hype or spectacle to justify its existence. It quietly delivers high-quality racing across the world, week after week. And once you truly understand what GT3 is and why it exists, it becomes clear that it is not a secondary category or a stepping stone. It is one of the strongest foundations that modern motorsport has, and one that continues to grow precisely because it understands its purpose.